Hello, welcome back to another Quarantine with Brennifry. As you can see, I don't have my trademark spikes because Corona's got me not cutting my hair and it's now too long to spike, so I just went full Guido and slicked it back. My father, I guarantee you when my dad watches this, he's gonna be like, you should do your hair like that more often. I like it like that. Like, he tells me that every time I do my hair like this. He's like, you should wear your hair like that more often. But I feel like it gives me like a six head. Like, so, but you know, Italian problems. Anyways, as always, I'm Tori. And this week has kind of flown by pretty quick for me. Nothing really to speak of. I didn't do any grading. I had to talk a few students off the ledge of like dropping the class because we're already like 12 weeks in at one school and like 10 weeks in at another school. And I'm like, you guys have done all the work so far. Like, you're so close. Like, don't, like, just, you can do it. I believe in you. But I get it. Everyone's like kind of, because the drop date's coming up and they're like, it's on the 15th. So they're like, do I drop? Do I not? But I'm like, you guys have done the work and you're already at a passing grade. Like, there's like 2 more papers left. Like, easy peasy. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been up to work-wise. Had a pretty good Mother's Day. Called my mom and my stepmom. Yeah, that's kind of all I've been up to. I beat another Path on Fire Emblem. I've only got 2 more left. Getting there, I'm like 148 hours in or something like that. Something insane. Yeah. Anyways, my show and tell for the week. I have my little pink ranger, Kimberly, her bow. I love her very much. I don't know if you can see the, like, it was Target, has a Funko Target line. Jen got it for me for my birthday. But yeah, that's my fun little pink ranger miniature figurine. I love her very, very much. I'll leave it right here so you guys can see her. And then I have my Full Metal Alchemist shirt on. You can't see it down below. It says hashtag Team Elric. I don't remember if Jen or Brenda got it for me, but one of them got it for me. I feel like it was Jen, but no, okay, it was Brenda. Okay, perfect. Just because Jen has bought like 90% of my wardrobe. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna toss it on over to Jen.
Hi guys, this is Jennifer. My week has been okay. It was a slow but fast, timey-wimey week. Work was work. In terms of my TV life, I got a lot of TV in this week. I watched a lot, but I don't remember much. I did finish the Mindy Project.
Nice.
This week. I had started the Mindy Project originally when it aired, and then stopped about like halfway through second season, I think, and then didn't pick it up. And so years later, I finally went through it again and finished it. And you know what? It was actually a good show. And I thought they did a really nice job with how they handled Mindy's character and specifically that relationship between her and Danny, even if Danny is infuriating.
Absolutely.
But I do think they handled her character well. So give it a watch. I also watched Bless This Mess, which was an ABC show. It's also really well done. I think it might get a 3rd season. I don't know, with COVID going around. So that's a good show. Hospital Playlist is still amazing as always, and Eternal Monarch just got really good this week. So I suggest that you guys go watch that. My item of the week is this Pluto plush. It's actually a 2-fer this week. It's this Pluto plush and also this pin.
Very cute.
Pluto in kind of a tuxedo outfit next to a portrait of himself, and it says September 5th, 1930, which is a really nice, neat gift from Brenda, and I really, really loved it. So
is it a magic wand he's holding in his mouth, or?
Yeah, it's like a wand.
Okay, yeah, it looks like the Fantasia one or something, I'm imagining. I don't know much about Disney, but that's what's happening in my head when I'm looking at it.
Yeah, so I really like these 2 gifts, so thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
You know.
Hi everyone. So Brenda here. This week has been pretty mellow in terms of work. I've met with a lot of students, and just in my own personal time, I've just started taking up a lot more walking than I'm used to. There's this moment this last week where I was just like, you know what, I need to move more just because I'm in front of my computer a lot, and so I just need to walk. And so I'm just listening to podcasts as I'm walking. And well, like I mentioned a few weeks back, I was listening to Fake Doctors, Real Friends, which is the Scrubs rewatch podcast, and I've been enjoying that and watching Scrubs. Like Jen, I've also been watching the Mindy Project. I love the Mindy Project mostly because it's a lot like it's a retelling essentially of Pride and Prejudice. But I really am a romantic and sappy romantic at heart. And so I really just I've only watched I had only originally watched like the episodes with Mindy and Danny, right? And where they're all happy and things are okay. And I didn't want to see him turn into a jerk. And so I finally, with Jen, watched it and really just enjoyed the story. Mindy has a really interesting type of humor that I just really enjoy. And just the story in general, you see her growth. And she doesn't quite fall into the stereotypical like love story, which is nice. It's a different kind of love story. And so I really enjoyed that. I've also gone back to watch Melissa and Joey, which is a lot lighter, right? And ridiculous, and two very awful people falling for each other. And it's just funny. I don't know. It's light. I try not to think about it too much. And there's a lot of callbacks to Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is another series that I just really enjoy. So in terms of my object of the week, it's actually keeping on brand with what we're going to be discussing today, which is Mulan. This is little brother from Mulan. He's a little plushie that I got at the Disney store.
So cute.
I can't remember if I bought it or if Jen got it for me because we buy each other a lot of stuff. So I don't actually remember. Jen, did you get this one for me or did I get it for myself?
I have no idea.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
For you, I might have, but I'm not sure.
I'm sure you've bought at least one dog plushie for me. It might have been Little Brother. It might not have, but I don't know. He's my favorite. Little Brother's actually Mulan's dog. He gets all of 90 seconds of airtime, I think, in the film. But he's just one of the Disney dogs that I really like, and so he's my little plushie.
He's such a derp, I love him.
He is, he's derpy is what he is.
Derpy. He's so derpy.
He has the bone in his mouth and his like cheeks are, I love it so much.
He's amazing. He's one of my favorites.
Derpy, I love him.
Well, and it's like all the animals on Disney, right? Every single one of them has such a massive personality, and I think that's definitely true for the Mulan animals, right? Little Brother, Khan the horse, Mushu, right? They all have such enormous personalities that it's just enjoyable.
What's the cricket's name?
Creaky.
Creaky, okay.
Oh, sorry. My nerd is showing.
I watched it on Saturday and I still I was like, I don't know the cricket's name.
I had it on right before we started the Zoom call. So you guys might have heard the song as it was playing, but I quickly tried.
Which one was it?
The one where it doesn't matter.
Well, that's a good segue. Like Brenda said, to this week's topic, in keeping with our theme for this month for Asian Pacific Islander stories, we have chosen to talk about Mulan, the 1998 Disney animated film, not the 2020 live action film that is yet to hit theaters. We'll discuss that a little bit later, and in terms of how we view that in conjunction to this film that we watched when we were younger. But because these two love Mulan so much, I want to start off with, what was your favorite musical number?
That is a really hard question because Mulan is such a great example of quality over quantity because there's only like 3 songs, but they're like the best songs. Like
Oh no.
Yeah. I think my favorite is, it's a tie between Reflection and Make a Man Out of You.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a fair question to ask. You know, I thought we were gonna ease into this and not have the difficult questions up front, so thank you for that, Jen.
Hey, I
I
gave you a list and an outline of what we were going to talk today, and the first question was favorite musical number. So do not treat me like I did not warn you beforehand. Do not make me
no,
out to be a villain. We did that for the Batman podcast.
I'm not calling you a villain. I think even what I'm trying to say is, even with all this time to think about it, because you're right, you gave us this outline a while ago, and I remember thinking about that question and always forwarding and to say, no, I'll think about it later because it's too hard of a question, right? And so I don't know why in my head, I thought you were in my head for some reason and processing with me, and in some way we had this conversation where we would just kind of bypass that question, but that's ridiculous to expect. So I think I'm with Tori. I'll Make a Man Out of You is one of my favorites. But I think the one that I think her version of Reflection, not the Christina Aguilera version, but the version that she sings in the movie, is definitely one of my favorites. That said, Honor to Us All is just nice. It's so, I think it's so rich, right? Especially when you have it, because it's the first song, right? Honor to Us All is the first song that comes out in the film, and it's such an interesting juxtaposition because the entire number is about women making themselves beautiful so that they can be the perfect bride, right? And to bring honor to the family. And while every single girl in that lineup looks gorgeous and she's dressed to the nines, through the entire thing, the one part that Mulan gets to sing is about her father, right? Ancestors, hear my plea, help me not to make a fool
of me.
And to not upset my family tree, keep my father standing strong, right? And that part, I mean, it speaks volumes, right? Because it's everything that Mulan is, but you have this really weird tension, right? And I think I actually want to compare it, and I'm sorry for the literary reference, but it kind of reminds me of North and South, the novel that starts off with this marriage, right? And the novel sets a tone for that opening sets a tone for the entire novel, where you're like, oh yeah, there's a marriage, but that's not the important thing here, right? And so here you have these women bringing honor to their family, but it's that reminder, no, this isn't actually what matters. This is not the thing that we're here to watch. We're here to watch this girl try to protect her father, right? And I think that's such an interesting tension at just to start off a movie, let alone a Disney film like that. I think is really smart. And so that's one of the reasons why I like that song, but that's why I bring it back to, like, I don't know, every single song has a very different, like Tori said, it's what did you call it?
Quality over quantity.
There you go.
Because I think there's only like 3-4 songs in the entire movie, versus some of the other ones, like Frozen had like 8 billion, I felt like. And not all of them are that good. Like, there's some good ones, don't get me wrong, but it was like I definitely feel like every single one in Mulan is good. Like,
yeah, and they move the plot in a very particular new way, and it's so effective, right? And that's one of the reasons why when you look at the sequel, you're like, what?
But like, I love like the tone of like Girl Worth Fighting For, which is matched by like seeing the decimated village, right? It's like they take you up and then they drop you. Like,
yeah, with no warning. And that's one of the things that I noticed when I was watching it this weekend, is that consistent pattern of rising you up and having this very feel good moment with the reality of, oh, I'm sorry, the stakes are actually pretty high right now. We're in the middle of a war. She's breaking the law in 20 different ways.
I think just after I think just after Make a Man Out of You, the one archer guy shoots one of the messengers that's like running back, like,
that sounds accurate, yeah.
Because he's like, how many men does it take to deliver a message? And he's like, one.
And all you hear is and that's so dark for a Disney film, right? I remember, that was dark. Mind you, there's a lot of moments in Mulan that made me fall apart.
I cried like 7 times.
Yeah, and I think
it hit me harder as an adult, though.
You know what? I thought it would hit me harder as an adult, but I remember when I was a kid, the scene where the father walks up to pick up the orders I remember falling apart and just tearing the fuck up. Like, oh my God, no, he's gonna go. He doesn't have a son. It has to be him because it can't be the daughter. And then when the wife hands him back his cane and
he doesn't take it. Absolutely no.
Well, this projection, right? Because I also think about like my own family, right? And I've always been close with my own father, right? And so always kind of thinking about what it means for the patriarch, right? And don't get me wrong, Latino families are very complicated and who's the matriarch and who's the patriarch and who really has power. But for me, it was just that I don't know, guys. It was really close, and it hit all the feels, because there's also that sense of family responsibility, right? And what our role is within that family. But we'll get to that later. Jen, do you have a favorite song?
I thought you guys were on a roll. I was just here for the ride.
There's no escaping this one.
Hey, I didn't sing that part because I was very close to just bursting into song.
And I think our audience deserves you and Tori singing. So I'm okay with letting that happen. But you're both too shy right now because I called you out on it. So let me distract you with my favorite song. I think one of my favorite songs on that track was probably Make a Man Out of You. It's very, I like the beat of that. I think it comes out with a strong drum beat, right? And has nice little bass going. I think was exposed to the Christina Aguilera version of Reflection before I was to the movie version.
I didn't know she did it. I need to Google that later.
¿No sabías que Cristina Aguilera también tenía un álbum en español? Are you kidding me? OMG. I got the Spanish version. I didn't get the... So, I actually didn't know she sang in English.
I didn't know she sang in Spanish.
Mind you, when we were growing up, Genie in the Bottle was probably the most famous song for all of that summer, right? And I feel like
that's the only song of hers I knew. That and then Fighter later.
Yes, Fighter.
Right? Like, I feel like those are the only two I know.
You can't forget Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Beautiful.
I think I was exposed to that version first, and then and then I heard the movie version. I love both versions.
Did she do it as not propaganda, exposure for the actual movie, or did she do it later because it was so popular?
She actually did the music video for the
Oh, I didn't know that, like, at all.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Jen. Just a quick addition. So I had the VHS version growing up, and at the end of the VHS, you actually had two music videos, and one of them was Christina Aguilera's version of Reflection, and then the 98 Degrees song.
I feel like I vaguely remember this.
I'll send you the link once we're done with.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So, I know I don't know if they've changed this because I don't have like social media and I don't really pay attention to things until Jen tells me about them. But I know, at least as far as my current knowledge goes, that the live action 2020 Mulan is not going to have any music.
Correct.
How do we feel about that versus, like, given that it has such a strong musical background from the original, how do you guys feel about the lack of at least reflection?
I was sort of upset a little bit at the time, but then again, I don't have this connection to Mulan that you two do, which is really interesting in itself. But I thought I was fine with it once I heard their justification for it, right? They wanted to really be authentic to the story, to the characters, to the region, as much as they can be, right? This is a Disney American enterprise as it is, right? So, it just didn't make sense for them to include music, right? And then still kind of treat it with the same lens of authenticity that they wanted. So I was fine with them letting that go. Not all the live actions that are happening,
right,
with the revamp of the certain movies. I was going to say princess movies, but they redid The Lion King.
Right.
Not all of them have been completely successful. And
Right,
so I
right.
think that it's fine for me that they let go of that aspect if they were going to, keep certain aspects true, like Mulan still being a badass, right?
Yeah.
And still leading the charge in terms of, being in front of the military, being the strong Asian woman that we don't get to see a lot of, right? So I was fine with them letting it go, but I know that a lot of people were upset by the fact that, the music was not going to be involved.
I was one of those people. Just because Mulan is so much of its music, right? And I mean, I started this conversation with, I still don't think it's fair to ask which one's my favorite, right? Because I can't pick one. That said, I was initially really angry and frustrated, and it's like, oh, it's gonna suck, I'm not gonna watch it, right? But then Jen shared that article with me about the tone that they were aiming for, and so I let go of it a little bit, mostly because it's okay. I think, and I struggle with this a lot. It's okay for me to love the childhood version of what it was, right? It's a great movie. I don't need that again. And one of the things that I actually find frustrating with the Aladdin remake, which is another film that I adore, right?
I haven't seen the remake
Mulan.
yet.
So I watched the remake and it was fine. There was nothing bad about it. It was, sorry.
Yeah, I love the original Aladdin movie. Actually, specifically the direct to VHS Aladdin 3, King of Thieves, Prince of Thieves, that's the best Aladdin.
Love that one. Oh, we need
right?
to talk about that Aladdin. I love that
It was
one.
so good.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
it's funny.
in watching the remake of Aladdin, I enjoyed the film. It was fine. But I think there was an element of, I actually wanted a little bit different. Like, I really enjoyed the addition of Princess Jasmine's song, right? Because that's in the live action. That's not in the original, and I thought that was a really nice addition. And so in watching Aladdin, I started realizing, you know what, I actually do want something different from the live action Mulan. So I'm really excited to see the new version. And just because, you know what, the song they're campy, right? And as musical theater is campy, it lends itself well to specific genres, and animation's one of those genres, and so it doesn't necessarily translate as well or as effectively on live action, right? Don't get me wrong, it's still possible to do that, but I'm okay if that's not what this movie's about.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, the way, as you were talking, I was thinking, like, not choosing to do the music parts of the Mulan film for this live action film allows the creators to kind of reclaim that story for themselves and kind of relay a more authentic, maybe in scope and just like in tone, Asian Chinese story, right? I know that we had this one conversation about how Brenda, you were just completely gobsmacked and kind of had a conflict when you found out that, like, Shang's voice was voiced by Donny Osmond, and you didn't know what to do with that, right? And I don't think you still do.
I don't know who that is.
Here's the thing. So Donny Osmond, whatever you may think about him, he's probably the whitest dude I've ever seen, right? And so to find out that he did the voice for a song that I know not only love, but for a character that's Asian, right? It was, I don't know. I think it hit me where I realized how naive I've been, right, in terms of consuming media. Because I think in the back of my head, I just assumed that his voice was Asian, right? That the actor or the voice actor was Asian.
Would match the character.
Yeah, that made sense in my head for some reason. And so when I found out Donny Osmond did the voice, he does a fine job with the song. I love the song. I still do. But it was just one of those moments where it's like, we need to keep having this conversation. Representation matters, and the fact that Donny Osmond did the voice for this song it's you know what, I want different.
Right. And I like that point that you bring up, that representation matters, right? Especially when we talk about a film like Mulan, like many of the actors that voiced the singing parts or the characters were white, right? And that that association, like you should look part that you voiced, right, kind of, and the part that you were visually seeing becomes something that impacts our childhood, right? And I think there's a lot to be said there about what how that impacted us as individuals and what we look for when it comes to, you know, people of color characters, and what our media has allowed for us, right? For a long time, Jackie Chan was, you know, to bring it back to our podcast.
Absolutely.
Jackie Chan was that representative voice for Asians. And while we have so much love for him, right? And I mean us, we, right?
Mm-hmm.
While we have so much love for him and Jackie Chan Adventures and all the films that, you know, he had for us growing up, he was that sole representation of Asian for a very long time. And I think we've done a better job at representation. You know, we have Crazy Rich Asians that came out, right? We have Fresh Off the Boat, but again,
Shang-Chi's on its way.
Right, we have Kim's Convenience Store that's on Netflix, right? Like again, we have the Mindy Project as well, right? Again, you know, representation matters, and not just, you know, one-time silos of representation either, right? What did it mean to you guys? I didn't grow up with Mulan, so I can talk a little bit about the absence of that, but what did it mean for you both to see a person of color character on your screens at such a young age?
Yeah, for me, I I don't know. Like I think it was, for me, it was one of those things where, like, a lot of things I was exposed to, like, you know, Jackie Chan Adventures, all these sister, I just kind of was like, oh, it's on TV. Fantastic. Like, I didn't really like I didn't connect things. Like, I wasn't like, oh, like, this is different. I was just like, oh yeah, it's great. I love it. And I think I saw Mulan like 4 or 5 times in theaters. My grandma took my brother and I, because there was a movie theater by my grandma's house that, like, on Tuesdays it was like $3. And so she took us, because she would always just take all the grandkids, like, for the $3 movie. And my brother and I would not shut up about Mulan to my mom. We were like, Mom, Mulan, Mulan. So I was like, okay, fine, we'll go. Then we went and saw it, and she was like, wait, that was really good. We need to see this again. And then, like, we just kind of kept seeing it. But yeah, however, the one thing that really, really bothered me as a child that was Mulan related was I had the privilege of getting to go to Disneyland when Mulan came out, and they were doing Chinese New Year, Year of the Dragon, like, festival parade for Mulan. Like, it was fantastic. Like, I was like, what is happening? And I love all of it.
Year
But
2000.
what was that?
That was year 2000, because that was the year of the dragon.
Yeah, it must have been, right? It might not, I feel like it was Year of the Dragon, but it could have very well not been Year of the Dragon. But I definitely feel like it was, because it was like everything. It was like so cool. But I remember being so mad that they kept showing Mulan in her like going to the matchmaker outfit. And I was like, why? Like, I was like, that's not what she wears. That's not her armor. That's not her, like, regular clothes. Like, and I remember just being like, so, like, can she wear, like, the ones she would actually wear?
I think the answer to that is no. At least not according to Disney standards, because that's not her princess outfit. And she's not a princess is the thing. But anyway, I actually have 2 Disney images or pictures with Disney characters that I am very proud of, right? One of them is me holding Thor's arm. That is one of my prized possessions. And the other one is me standing just next to Mulan, right? Those 2 are my favorite things. But you were right. She was wearing her going to the matchmaker outfit.
Yeah, which she wears for all of 5 seconds.
Right. And that's not her. I mean, and that's the entire purpose of Reflection, the song, right? It's like, this is not who I am. Will I ever be a perfect daughter, right? And that's
like,
that
I'm doing this because society is telling me to do this.
Yeah. And I think, to answer your question, Jen, for me, it was that, right? That whole desire to be the daughter that my family needed, right? And I don't think I ever got over that. I think that's still something I struggle with today. I actually did not have, okay. I mean, I didn't grow up poor. I was well off. I never wanted for anything, but we didn't go to the theater ever, right? I think the first time I went to the theater, I was 11, maybe. I don't know, maybe a little older than that. I don't know. I remember we went to see Elf. Whatever year Elf came out, that's when I went to see it, right?
Stupid movie. My brother and I crack up so much to that movie.
So ridiculous. I enjoyed it, but that was my first time that I went to the theater. So with Mulan, I actually owned the VHS, and I can't remember if it was that someone, like my parents bought it for me, or if it was one of my parents' bosses that gave it to me, because I was always very lucky with my parents' bosses. They were all very, very kind to me. My mom's bosses, I used to call them my Asian grandparents, because they were basically my grandparents, right?
Yeah.
My grandparents live in El Salvador, so I didn't grow up with them. But well, it was, I remember having the VHS and watching it, and I was probably one of the only Disney VHSs that I owned. And I would watch it every Sunday, right? If I could. Sometimes I watched it more than once. It's my prized possession. I still own that VHS, mind you. I have the DVD. I will never let go of my VHS, just because it's such fond memories, right? Just watching when I was a kid. I can't tell you why I bought it or why I got it. I really don't remember. I just remember watching it and just connecting with Mulan, particularly in her desire to be the person that her family wanted her to be, right? Or that struggle, right? Not to be necessarily try to fit in, but at the same time make her family proud, right? And I think that connection, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the film, that connection that you see in Mulan to like the family ancestors, right? Well, I always think of that as particularly Asian. I think it was during a meeting. I was sitting with someone and they mentioned Coco, right? And it hit me, you know what? I always think of ancestral connections as very Asian, right? Or very African, right? In terms of like African mythology and that connection to your ancestors. But I always forget, in Latin America, we have that same connection to our past and to our ancestors. And so I think that's very interesting. I not to say that white people don't have that. I don't know. I'm not as connected. I don't know that part, right? But it is a trend that I'm seeing among communities of color, right? That connection to our past, to the people who lived before us, understanding their wisdom, trying to carry that wisdom forward as guides in our own life, right? And I think that in particular, that connection is one of the things that why I enjoyed Mulan so much and why I connected so much with her, despite the fact that I'm obviously not Asian or hold any part of that culture, but there's something inherently connecting, if that's a sentence, I don't know, but there's just something that I gravitated to with that storyline.
Yeah, I think that we had talked, a little bit about this in the Jackie Chan vlog that we put together. How, there are patterns and there are customs and there are things that we are doing that are, almost transcend these race and ethnic lines, right? We, like you mentioned, Brenda, the ancestral part of my culture, it's also seen in Latinx cultures as well. I see that with, my Salvadorian heritage as well. There are communal points, there are common points between all these cultures that, unite us more than divide us, right? And I think I think there's something to be said about how society has decided to box us in and how we view those lines of division, because it's very hard for us sometimes to see that there are more points of connection than there are of separation, right? And I do see that with Mulan, there are a lot of nice touch points for the Asian culture. So, to give some background, like I didn't grow up with Mulan, which is, a tragedy.
Insane to me.
Yeah, it's insane, and it's actual tragedy. I grew up with a lot of other Disney movies instead. So I grew up with like Cinderella. Like my mom used to go, and this immigrant mom, she's full citizen now, guys. Do not panic. But she used to go to the swap meet and she would just pick out whatever looked child appropriate. And, the the vendor had like a Disney section, so it was just like those are all Disney movies. So she would just pick out things that looked appropriate. So she likes animals like I do. So I'm a huge Disney dog fan. I'm a huge, Brenda knows this very well. So I grew up with yes, I grew up with a bunch of Disney animal movies, but I also grew up with a bunch of Disney princess movies, right? And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was because the vendor didn't have it or whatnot, but I didn't grow up with Mulan. So instead, I grew up with films like Cinderella and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and then eventually I also grew up in Pocahontas. So I missed out on that connection, which is a tragedy because I am always looking for points of connection with my Asian culture. Mm-hmm. And I know that if I had grown up with her, I would have loved her and would have tried to emulate her. And I think I would have seen a lot of myself in her. Instead, what I had was Pocahontas. So I loved her, but I was also like not very comfortable with her either. So I remember I did have a Pocahontas doll and I had a couple of Pocahontas things. But it's because she was brown, she kind of looked Asian, and she had the long black hair, and I saw a little bit of myself, and I felt a little validated, I think, as a child, seeing that, even though I didn't like the film at all. Like, I was like, it's kind of, I don't know why, I just didn't. It's boring, right? Now I know why I don't like the film.
Yeah, I didn't like the film either. But I used to force myself to watch it because I liked the raccoon and the little hummingbird.
Yeah, I love the hummingbird, raccoon, and stuff, and
and Grandmother Willow. I was really into Grandmother Willow, and so I would force myself to watch it.
But see, there's something menacing about the Pocahontas villains. Now I understand colonialism, right?
Yeah. Right, colonial bullshit, right?
I loved the music though. I loved like Colors of the Wind. And, like I loved that stuff.
But for me,
I'm not enjoying Pocahontas is very petty and very small. It was that the Payless lady wouldn't sell me these cute boots.
I remember the story.
Right, because the movie hadn't come out yet, so I wanted the boots, right? They were pair of work boots. But they had the little Pocahontas logo, and she wouldn't sell them to me. She's like, "Oh, the movie hasn't come out yet." I'm like, "But I want the boots." And she's like, "Well, I can't sell them to you." And so I was a little kid at the time, and because of that, I just soured me to Pocahontas, the movie, right? That said, I enjoyed them, but I enjoyed the movie, the songs, but not the movie. Just, again, those villains are menacing. But I think a lot of it is, like you, Jen, my other Disney princess, and there's just not a lot of merch for her, is Princess J, right? Like, I love Princess Jasmine. She was my other icon.
I liked her a lot too.
I didn't care about Snow White or Cinderella. I hate Cinderella. Like, I really hate Cinderella as a film. I fall asleep during the same exact moments. Sleeping Beauty's fine. Whatever, I'll watch it. But Cinderella, I have a real bone to pick with her because it's just a boring film for me. Right?
And so, like, you bring up these. You bring up Princess Jasmine. I also didn't grow up with the Aladdin films. I was exposed
Really?
to Yeah.
Jen, this is a crime against humanity.
I know.
How?
I don't know. I wasn't.
That's another one that just, the music is excellent, right?
Aladdin was one of my favorites growing up. I loved Aladdin.
I was exposed by you, Brenda, in high school. That was like a full 10 years later. Yeah. I didn't grow up, but I grew up with The Little Mermaid, and so
I love Little Mermaid.
I do love The Little Mermaid. Yeah.
I know you hate Cinderella, but Cinderella was actually one of my favorite films, and I remember that I dressed up as her during Halloween, and so again, I would have, I think, preferred to have dressed up as Mulan or Princess Jasmine. If I knew about them, but I only had these kind of white princesses.
You know who I really identified with Disney princess adjacent wise was Megara from Hercules. Like, I loved her so much. I wanted to be her.
Sass queen.
Right, she was so sassy, and she was just basically a drag queen, and I loved her so much. My cousin had pajamas / costume that was her, and I was I wanted it so bad.
I implore you to go dress up as her and cosplay as her one day.
Right. She
But
was like,
like
just so she's like,
Hercules,
weak ankles.
And like
with Hercules, I didn't even grow up with that either. I grew up with the Disney on Ice version of Hercules, and I only grew up with Pegasus. Like I only remember my mom. I remember going to a Disney on Ice show, and the one thing I walked away was this like tiny Pegasus plush. I don't think I
I
have it
want
anymore.
a tiny Pegasus plush.
It's a baby Pegasus too. I love him so much, but I don't
You
think
still
I
have it?
anymore. I don't think so.
Oh.
But I remember that's the only thing I came away from the film, and I only got exposed to the film like later in life, and so like it connected. But again, I didn't grow up with any of these like people of color.
Honestly, for me, it was Mulan and Lion King and Aladdin. Those were the 3 Disney films because
Lion King scared me.
Expensive. But like Disney films are expensive, right? To buy the VHS, we're talking about like $20, and that, you know, for some of our families, that's a lot, right? So those were really the because I didn't go to theaters, right? So for me, it was those 3 movies, and I would just watch them on loop, and so. Yeah. And I mean, I was very fortunate that it was those 3 because I love the music from all 3, and those 3 are consistently still my favorite to this day. I love The Little Mermaid now, but I didn't watch it when I was growing up, right? So I didn't have exposure to those. But since you all are sharing what you dressed up as, one year, my aunt, I told her I really wanted to be Princess Jasmine, and she told me, well, I have the material, but I have it in red. So we can make a costume for you. And I'm like, but it's gonna be her skank outfit, right? And it was the one where she's like with what's his face?
Jafar.
Jafar, right? But she did sew it for me, and it was very pretty. And I remember wearing it, and I'm like, I do feel like Princess Jasmine, but I feel weird too. And she's like, yeah, I understand. So I did wear it, but I didn't go out into the world wearing it because I think we both agreed we weren't okay with that.
My mom really liked Disney, and I don't know what she had before my brother and I were born, but she like built this entire Disney collection for us of VHSs. I don't know where she got them. I just know we just had them. Like all of them, like ones I've never even heard of, like we would just like get. And then she would get us anything that Zsa Zsa was in or Ava was in, because my grandma and Zsa Zsa were like thick as thieves with each other, the showbiz family. It's a very long story. Long story short, my grandmother, her father was an animal trainer, trained the pig on Green Acres. She was there assisting him. Zsa Zsa was there watching Ava. Her and Zsa Zsa met at like the snack counter, and just like we're like, wait, where have you been all my life? I love you. And we're like best friends ever since. But yeah, so anything that she was in, like we would get like a signed copy of the box, like, and like just like all of that. But but we had a pretty extensive Disney collection. I don't feel like I watched all of them, but I also feel like I watched a lot of Disney movies that like other kids didn't, like just because like we just had them. Like Black Cauldron is one that I remember liking, that like no one knows what I'm talking about when I bring it up, except Chelsea, who yells at me.
And nobody who's watched it enjoyed it, so that you're even like a smaller, like it's a smaller demographic. I've never watched it, but I've heard a lot of people have very strong negative opinions about the film.
I don't totally remember it, but I just remember there's like a Great Horn King, and there's a Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
And there's this like weird like bear thing that likes apples. But that's like kind of all I remember.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but
I think the girl's name is Fiona.
Yeah, did not watch this. Yeah, I grew up with a lot of Disney films, but like the animal ones, so like those are my favorites. So like
Aristocats.
Yeah,
I loved Aristocats. And Oliver's Company. Oh my God, Oliver's Company. Oliver and Company.
Oliver's and Company.
And oh my God, I loved that movie.
I love 101 Dalmatians. That's my jam. I love the music for that as well. I loved all those films. So, you know, Lady and the Tramp, even though it's kind of slow, I love
that's my mom's favorite Disney movie is Lady and the Tramp. I just like emotionally connect so much with the poodle and Oliver's and Company. Like when she's like taking off her makeup and she's like, I'm such a mess. And I'm like, me too, girl.
I'm sorry, you guys. You mentioned 101 Dalmatians, and my brain just started singing Cruella de Vil. So.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, I don't remember any 101 Dalmatian songs except for the, like, TV show version. When it was, like, 102 Dalmatians.
Well, he's playing on the piano, and he's, like, singing Cruella de Vil.
Yeah.
As she's like, why the puppies?
Yeah, I remember that
Sorry,
song.
I don't know
Are there other songs in it?
Yes, there's an ending song at the end.
Okay.
It's not like Mulan has more songs.
Okay.
Yeah, Mulan has more songs, which, you know, I think speaks the fact that we're like connecting, like we watched animal films and we watched, you know, Disney animal films, and we watched all these other, and we can only name like a couple of Disney films, you know, that we really love, you know, speaks to the fact that there wasn't a lot of variety either growing up when it comes to, like, you know,
well, and access too.
Yeah, and access was a huge issue. Like, I didn't see any of these films in theaters either. I saw them on bootleg, which, you know, is a whole issue. But
awful thing is, then they would go into the vault.
Yes, and they'd never come out.
Yeah, and so that even limited for, especially, you know, lower income kids, right? It limited how much we could watch, right? We were lucky in some ways that we did have the Wonderful World of Disney every Sunday night. Did you guys ever watch that? So every Sunday night around
8 on 7, Channel 7, right?
Exactly. Okay. Channel 7, and they would play one Disney movie, right? And that's actually how I watched Lion King the first time. And I remember it was a Sunday night because I shared a room with my aunt, and we were watching as the lion was dying, and we were both just sobbing, right? And this was like 9. I had to get up early because she worked downtown, so I had to get up at 4 in the morning to like get dressed, and we were sobbing. It was awful, and it's probably one of my prized childhood memories, but which is funny. But I love the Wonderful World of Disney, but it was a consequence of having all these films in the vault, right? It's not like now that we can stream them on Disney Plus and enjoy them, which is great and wonderful, but you know, the vault really angered me at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I hadn't considered that. You're right. I think you're right. Like, access is a lot better, but even not at the same time, right? Like, if you can afford Disney Plus and you can afford a streaming stick and you can afford streaming just in general because of your internet, right? You can watch these movies, but you know, otherwise you're shelling out money for DVDs that are still, like, I think under that vault tradition, right? Like, there's only certain versions or editions that come out every so often.
Well, even the digital release, we're talking about $20 up, right? It's unfortunate, right? That, I mean, and I think Disney is one of those things where it's just it's so tied to my childhood. I don't know if it's tied to your childhood, you guys, in the same ways that I'm thinking, right? But it sounds like it is, because generally we have such close connections to these films and this media that we love and hold dear. We own merchandise, right? And I love it, but it's one of those things that I wish we could share more freely, right? With not just each other, but with like other children, right? With just that other children should have access to this kind of media because it is so formulating.
Right. And you know, that goes back to the question of Mulan, and you know, what does it mean to have a person of color as a lead, and on top of that, what does it mean to have a character like her not play the part or the trope of the damsel of this?
I think something that really stands out to me with that is, I mean, because she was kicking so much butt left and right, like, which is like, and then she like gets the arrow, like, it was so good, but
like, I let that slip through my fingers.
I let it slip through my fingers.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You mentioned the arrow. I'm looking at Kimberly on your desk, and I about that scene.
I had it right there, and it slipped through. It just like falls back in his hands. Like,
and then they all have to like land on him so that he doesn't fall over. Oh goodness.
She's like, "Wow, Cricket, you are lucky." And he's like.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
But it really, I think, for me, I think specifically having a movie do so well with a woman of color, female, that wasn't damsel in distress. So I feel like Jasmine started to get us there, and then I think Mulan shattered that ceiling. And then I feel like from there we got like Lilo and Stitch, right? Like I felt like Lilo did a lot of that, right? Similar, right? And then I feel like even from there it's kind of gone further, like with like, you know, with Moana and like even Merida, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is really great how like they've kind of been pushing this like you can see kind of the evolution of it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's because Mulan like shattered it.
No, I agree. I think that, you know, I obviously didn't grow up with Mulan, but you know, Mulan very much fell into that niche where I was watching Xena, the warrior princess relative,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was watching like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, right? Who is kick-ass in her own way. You know, I was watching all these badass women characters growing up, and you know,
Yeah.
Mulan fits into that niche, right? Like here she is wielding this like really great sword, like badass,
Better than the boys.
right? And
Like
she's
does the cannon and like gets all of the Hun army instead of just the one, which they were saying to do, because she's like, no, I'm not a dumb boy, I'm gonna get them all. Like,
yeah,
we actually need
like,
to talk about that scene, but
right, like for me, like she was fitting also like that Lucy Liu character in Charlie's Angels, right? Like that's something I watched before I watched Mulan.
I loved that
So
movie.
again, yeah, me too. So I was really, you know, I thought it was fantastic to have this character, and I think it's fantastic that, you know, a character existed like that in 1998, you know, and was there for the people that watched her, right? And provided something different for viewers other than, you know, other than what we had traditionally have seen, right? And I really enjoyed that. I think that it's gotten better, and we've gotten more, you know, more versions of women, badass women characters.
Yes.
But you know, I think it was pretty revolutionary to have that at 1998.
Oh yeah.
He was
Like,
definitely a trailblazer. I think when we go back, and you mentioned Merida earlier, Tori.
yeah.
Brave is not one of my favorite movies, but I enjoy it for what it is. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Mulan. She's, you know, I mentioned it earlier. We start off with this, oh, she's gonna be a bride kind of deal, and that's not the story that we get, right? It's the story about a girl who wants to do what's best for her family. She wants to bring honor to her family, and she's not going to do that by being a bride, because that's not who she is. So she needs to find and forge her own path. And I think, I mean, it's so ingrained in what the experience is for so many youth of color, right? Especially first gen kids, right? Where we kind of have to figure out what it means to be American while simultaneously grappling with whatever our cultural identity is. And when you're mixed, you have other layers to that too, right? I'm not mixed, but you guys can speak to that. And I think Mulan kind of does a really good job of highlighting that the reality for most of us is that we can't follow that path, because that path, one, doesn't exist for us because we're not in our parents' country, right? Two, we kind of have to figure it out on our own, because the reality for us is very different, right? It means having to understand this culture that no one's going to teach you, right? Because our families don't know what it means to be American, right? And that's ridiculous, actually. That's really stupid, right? But I mean, like, look at it, having to learn that, right? Whether that be the language, whether that be the food, whether that be how to conduct yourself in a professional meeting, right? Because that's the skill that we actually have to learn on our own, right? That part we kind of have to figure it out on our own. And so while also learning our heritage, right? And so I think Mulan kind of grapples with all of that, while always reminding us that that family is number one, right? That family impulse and that connection, and that all of those values, those things that we protect, we will do whatever it takes to protect that, right? And I think she does a really good job of doing that and highlighting that.
Yeah, I like all the points that you brought up. You definitely see that donning of different costumes, right? Like you see that with Mulan becoming king and having to learn how to be a man and having to learn how to be a soldier on top of being a man, right? And a soldier to China on top of being a soldier on top of being a man, right? And so I really like that's something that incredibly parallels a journey for first gen kids, right? It incredibly parallels the journey of any child of any kind of ethnic or racial background different from the American experience, the white American experience. You're right, Brenda. Like I had to learn how to conduct myself in professional meetings, and it's still a learning process. I still feel very much inadequate and inadequately trained, and I'm constantly aware of my speech patterns. I'm constantly aware of how my face might look, right? My hand gestures, right? I'm constantly having to double think about things I might want to say and might not be able to say in certain situations. I don't want to appear so far off the grid or so, kind of an unlikable that I lose whatever momentum I have in my career path, right? And I think that that's something that fear that I have is very much echoed in Mulan's fear and being discovered as, being a woman and taking her father's place in the army.
Right.
Well, and it speaks to the demands of the individual that are placed on the individual, right? Of having to mold yourself to fit the situation. We've talked about Miss Marvel, right? And why her superpower is transformation, or what was it? I'm sorry.
She calls it polymorphing, but it's like the same, means the same thing.
Yeah. Right. There's another shape-shifting. That's the word I was looking for.
Embiggen!
It's a physical representation of code switching, right? And what we're asked and what's demanded of us to be able to code switch effectively to communicate with different audiences. And I think Mulan does that, right? She has to be with her family and she has to wear this one mask. And then to be the public persona, she has to be the bride, right? And then, but that's not going to work when she's in the army. She has to be Ping, and he's ridiculous, but because he has no idea how to be a man, right? But in all of that, I think you see that that struggle, right? That constant having to move from one place to the other and having to don all these different masks. It's exhausting, and it is. Yeah. It's a toll, and yet it's one that we wear with pride a lot of the times, right? Because it does mean that I can communicate with my family, right? That I can have these conversations with my really thick Salvi accent, right? And then that I can go into a room and be like, I'll talk to you, I'll professional, like whatever, you guys get the point, right? But it's tiring to a lot of degrees, and I think this film really highlights that. And it was something I was thinking about as I was watching it this last time, which hit me. I'm like, wow, this is really nuanced for a kids film, right? As Disney
in the 90s.
Yeah.
And you're talking about all these masks, right? And how we put them on and we're able to then enter certain spheres and communicate in certain spheres because of these masks. But because of these masks, it's incredibly isolating as well, right? It's absolutely. Yeah, you can talk with your parents in the Salvi accent, and then you can go talk to us in this other accent, right? Or this other speech pattern, and then you can go on to talk to your students in this other speech pattern. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I find myself isolated and feeling like I'm alone in this, and completely exhausting. And it's incredibly fragmenting for my sense of identity.
Definitely, especially when we're having conversations about authenticity, right? When you're having to code switch from one place to the other, and you kind of have a moment to breathe to yourself, you're wondering, well, which version of me is the most authentic me, right? I don't know, and honestly, it depends on the day. Which is one of the reasons why
Mulan That's such a Gemini thing to say.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I got no comeback for that.
The Pisces is going to feel bad.
I feel called out. I feel put on blast.
It's okay, Brenda. The Pisces is going to feel bad about that after this is over.
I know, I'll probably
But then
cry.
the Hufflepuff in me feels bad for making him feel bad, and it's just a vicious cycle of emotions. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why we find so much solace in each other, right? Not to get all gooey and gushy with you guys, right? But one of the reasons why I feel safe talking to you guys is that there's no expectation of like, oh, she's not gonna speak proper English, or I'm gonna, right? And I can code switch with you guys, and you'll just look at me like either explain or we're gonna move on, right? There's a thing with Jen that I used to do is I would always throw Spanish euphemisms at her, right? And she would just stare at me like, you expect me to understand that? And so it just became a running joke between the two of us. I've actually done it to Tori a few times, I think, maybe once or twice. And it's just, and so that now he does it to me in Italian. And it's just part of embracing the fact that all the identities that we have, they're just in here and they'll pop in at random moments because we can't control it. And that's one of the heartbreaking things about the film, right? Is the fact that Mulan has to control it because her life depends on it. And for us, our livelihoods depend on it, right? And a lot of, especially for like Jen, when meetings like that, right? I think I feel the same way when I'm in staff meeting and faculty meetings and they're talking to us about the latest pedagogy. And I feel like I have to not only elevate my speech, but also elevate my thinking. And I'm like, wow, that's really tiring. I'm just going to sit here in the background and see if I can fade into the wall.
Become invisible, head down, have no one know who you are, bring no attention to yourself.
And that's a problem, right? Especially when we're talking about gender.
Yep.
Which is a huge issue in Mulan. We haven't even touched on the gender.
I've been waiting for this. I have so much to say about gender in Mulan.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you feel about the gender bending? Which is a common trope, actually, in Asian like narratives.
Yeah. I have so much to say about gender. Okay, so the first thing that's in my head right now is I love this scene where, so she's already been outed as Mulan and they're like going through China to the Emperor's house and they're like, we did it, yeah. And
oh my God,
like,
I love that.
And like no one will listen to her. And then Mushu's like, what? Did you say something? And she's like, Mushu. And he's like, you're a girl now. Like no one cares about you anymore. Or what you have to say anymore. And she was
including
like,
Mushu, right?
Including Mushu.
He's like, oh, what do you
and then
expect? You're a
he
woman
like cuts Shang off with her horse because he will not listen to her. And she goes, you trusted Ping. Why is Mulan any different? And like, he's just kind of like,
she only said that after Shang says, you don't belong here, Mulan.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so good. But then it's countered by Shin Yu, I think that's his name. And when he calls Mulan specifically, because like she puts her hair up, she's like, it was me in the mountains, right? And she goes, the soldier from the mountains, not the woman, not female, not like just the soldier, because he sees her and respects her as an enemy warrior, like, which I thought was just like so brilliant, like, because he didn't say, like, he said nothing like, oh, you're a woman? Like, that soldier from the mountains was a woman this whole time? Like, he doesn't say any of that. He was just like, the soldier from the mountains. Like, doesn't even faze him.
No emphasis on the gender, right? Whereas this has been such a big issue with her own army. The enemy army is just like, oh, you're the
the villains don't even.
You're the person.
They're like more woke than the Chinese army.
Okay. Actually, and that's another issue that I had in watching this.
Yeah.
Do you guys see how
the coloring?
The way the Huns are drawn.
The way they act, the way they move, the way they look.
Yeah, that was really problematic.
Very problematic. Shin Yu is like crawling, like all that. He's always hunched, and he has physical claws.
Yes, their teeth are sharpened, their eyes are yellow, and I'm watching this and thinking, wow, this is messed up. This is not okay. Like, Disney, what were you? Like, and
I have the same thought on the rewatch as well. I was like, oh, this is how we're talking about people like of Hun descent. Okay.
We're thinking China, okay, everywhere else, no?
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that, and I mean, I can't speak to it because I'm obviously not Asian, but we do see this in Latin American countries, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, the most visible are if you're in
Italians do it too.
If you're Mexican or if you're Colombian, right? Those are probably the most visible countries on Latinx media. Central America is just like we're not there, right?
Central America,
and,
who?
right. What was it?
Is that the middle of Mexico?
Right. And so I think there's a lot of nationalist, and it's ridiculous. Honestly, it's genuinely ridiculous, the nationalistic bullshit that arises because of it. But I think that's what we're seeing in Mulan, right? That nationalism, right? One better than the other. And so honestly, I think about like the yellow eyes, the sharp teeth, the fact that they're crawling and they look very animalistic in a lot of renderings.
Yeah.
That's really problematic. And one of the things that I did not enjoy on my rewatch of the film.
Agreed.
And I do hope that the live action addresses that in a much more, not just nuance, but in a better way, right? Like I do demand that from my media.
Because people of Han descent have been done dirty in films, at least to my knowledge, twice now, with that one Great Wall of China movie where they were physical demons. And like like they weren't even in the movie, they were just demons. And or monsters, or I didn't watch it, it looked dumb. But
my dad wanted to go watch it, so action film, China related. He's like, let's go watch it. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but like, it's like.
The one with Matt Damon?
I think Matt Damon's in it, yeah, which is also very confusing for me.
Is it like when Tom Cruise is going to save Japan?
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Last Samurai. I have a lot of things to say about that movie.
No, but you're right. I think that, it's not something that's unique to Latinx cultures, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. But it's all, you see it across multiple races and ethnicities, right? There's a lot of conversation. I think #BlackAF sparked a conversation about Rashida Jones and her blackness, because people tend to forget that she's black. Even every so often they're like, oh my gosh, she's black, even though her dad is Quincy Jones, right? So there's always this call to examine what her blackness is and what does that mean, right? You see it in Asian culture as well. There are the big three, right, that we think about constantly: China, Korea, Japan, and then everyone else. And not to kind of step on anybody else's toes and make anyone else feel uncomfortable, but that's how it kind of gets parsed out. And you do see that level of skin color being very much talked about in Asian cultures. Tan France from Queer Eye started an account called Shaded on Instagram to talk about color, right? And how, because he grew up with whitening creams around in his Indian culture, and how he sees that very problematic. So he's trying to give a voice to folks that are to embrace their skin color and to feel empowered in their skin color, because he doesn't think that that's okay. And I completely and utterly agree with him. You see that in Chinese culture with all these top Asian stars doing immense kind of coverings to make sure that they're porcelain white. They're also trying to make sure that they have the perfect kind of facial proportions. Like there's that golden 8 rule where you have the same kind of proportions. You have to have a small face, and that's kind of seen as very, very beautiful, in the same way that small feet were considered very beautiful, and led to horrific practice in culture, right? So you have all of these kind of terrible misgivings about skin color across all racial and ethnic lines, which is problematic, right? And yes, it was incredibly problematic to see that in this film as well. I think Brenda's a bit frozen. No, she's back now.
That wasn't okay. And like I said, I hope that the live action addresses that. You're right, Jen, that it's not unique to Latinx culture. I remember hearing a lot from different friends who would say, oh, make sure that she doesn't go out into the sun so that she doesn't get dark, right? And it was just a weird random colorism. But it was so flippantly addressed, right, that it becomes part of your social conditioning, and it's awful. And I remember having friends who were like of darker complexion than I was, and they would get like really ugly nicknames, and and then when you live it, right, and then you see it on your screen replicated, right, that's problematic, because it does become, it starts off as like a subtle comment, and then it permeates our media, and that's not, it just creates a space for more egregious and more obvious racial profiling and inequities to kind of come to the forefront. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really hope that the remake addresses that in a better way. Right?
Yeah, and I do think that we deserve some positive Hun descent, like, demonstration showing, because I feel like I've been exposed to the Huns 3 times as like an entity. It was like in Mulan, that Great Wall of China movie, and then the throat singers that are really popular right now. Like,
Oh,
I feel like that's like the only exposure I've ever had, and 2 of them aren't great. So like,
right. No, you're right. Like, there isn't enough, like, when, going back to my comment, like, for a very long time, Jackie Chan was the symbol and was the representative of all of Asia, and Asia looked very diverse and very different to what Jackie Chan is, right? And not, and even now, right, like what you're saying, demonstrates there needs to be a call for more diverse films out there, because like you said, there's maybe 3 representations of it, and maybe there's more. We're not aware of that, right?
Well, that's one of the reasons why Crazy Rich Asians was such a beautiful film, right? Because you got to see different parts of Asia that weren't China, Korea, or Japan, right? We got to see what it means to be Malaysian, and even on the periphery, you got to see a little bit of Thailand, right? And just the fact that these are Asian cultures that don't often get highlighted in the way that they deserve, because they are equally rich in their teachings, but also in their culture, right? And so I think that's one of the good things about having additional representation, right? Mulan is very one-sided, and it's very skewed to the Chinese perspective, right?
Yes.
And even it's not even the Chinese perspective, it's the white perspective. I'm sorry, the Chinese perspective through a white lens, right?
Right.
And
it's the Orientalism, right? Orientalism of China and of this culture, right? Like, in literary studies, there's a huge, like, especially the British were incredibly entranced by the Orient, and so you have a lot of very disturbing depictions of the Orient, and how individuals felt Oriental for a while, how that's that was not okay, right? So I think I like this conversation, because we started with, we love this film. These are the things that we love about this film, right? And then what we're doing here is, we're discussing the parts that are still problematic. So to those listening, it's not that we love this film wholeheartedly without seeing its flaws. We see no flaws completely. It's I think for us, we can still hold those that love, because that's part of our childhood, part of our young adulthood, right? And but it's also important to see that love for what it is, right? And how it can be problematic, and to challenge it, and to kind of contend with it, and still talk about the nuances.
You can love something and still watch something and still enjoy something while also critiquing it.
Right. And I think this is lending to a very nice conversation about, people of color, colorism, right? And ethnic and racial identity, all of that. And to think that Mulan is inspiring that is kind of also awesome to think about.
That's
what good fiction does. I mean, it highlights the beauty of our reality, but also points at some of the problematic aspects of our society.
Absolutely.
And for me, like, my question for you guys is, what do you hope in terms of, like, what do you want out of Mulan, the life,
the 2020
yeah, the 2020 version, like, what do you want Mulan's legacy to be? You know,
Yeah.
the 1998 version to be for future generations.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I from that first trailer was blown away by the amount of care they put into the martial arts for the film. Like it was looking phenomenal to me. I love martial arts films. I love Crouching Tiger, House of Flying Daggers, basically anything with Michelle Yeoh in it. Like I love all of it. And I love it. I like consumed it like crazy as a child. And it's reminding me a lot of those. And we had some phenomenal martial artists using the wire apparatuses in the early mid 2000s. And I'm just so excited to see what they do with this because I feel like it's finally gonna become that blending of like martial arts film, but like we're actually getting it. Like we're not gonna get the dubbed version. Like, so I'm really excited. Maybe we'll get a dubbed version. Who knows? But I'm really excited for that because it's just so cool. Like I think like Jet Li is another one that I loved all of his movies as well. Less than Jackie Chan, but I still love very much. And just like I'm very excited, and the martial arts is looking great, and those stunt doubles know how to use a freaking sword, let me tell you. Like, I was watching and I was like, every single swing, I was like, yep, someone trained for 20 plus years with that. Like,
Wait, how can you tell?
it's the way that they move it. Like, cause like when people are using like prop weapons, they're much lighter and not sharp. So a lot of stunt doubles just kind of swing them around because they know they're not going to hurt themselves. But you could see from it's very, very quick, but the way that they like, grab a ruler. So like, it's in the wrist, right? So they were like coming in this way and stuff, and like the way they were moving it, like you could tell that they have some training, like for real with like a Chinese sword, because the Chinese sword is different than like an English sword.
Tell us about that, because you know you're talking to like an audience, me and whoever might be listening who doesn't know anything about this.
I'm not super familiar with Chinese weapons. The martial arts I grew up in is Korean, so I know of them, and I've competed against people that specialize in Chinese weapons. So I know, like, I don't know their like appropriate names, but I know what they look like, and I know what they're supposed to do. So there's like this one sword where it's very flat and it's very long and it curves up, and you flick your wrist with it, and it makes like a sound, like it like it's like very wiggly. There's that one that's very, and they put the flags on the end, and they spin them around like this really fast, and they're amazing to watch because the flag is like mesmerizing.
K-dramas.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing.
Probably not the same thing.
It might be if it's the flat sword with the red. It's usually a red flag on the end, because the red like is easy to catch the color. That's the one, and then there's the Chinese like similar to like what you would think with a knight sword, but it's skinnier on the blade, and the hilt isn't as big as like the Arthurian kind of sword you would think, like Excalibur. Like the hilt is smaller, the blade is like it's a sword. It's not as long as like a traditional like broadsword, I guess, or knightly sword, but it's a little bit shorter. And yeah, like the one Mulan uses. That's a Chinese sword.
Okay. So the difference to then an English sword is like
the weight.
The weight, they're a little heavier. The hilt is a little longer because it's expected to kind of use it to help parry the hilt. The butt of it is a lot longer. Usually it's in a way to where you could use two hands on an English sword. If you wanted, it can work like either way. Whereas the Chinese one, it's a little too short to use both hands on it. You would put another one in the opposite hand, right? And then with your flags. But
so speed versus power.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, not power, strength, I guess.
It's less like cleaving and more like slashing, if that makes sense. Like the English sword is meant to like cleave through that person's shoulder or decapitate or like, you know, like cut them in half, where the Chinese one won't do that. It'll slice you deep, but it's not gonna like like cut, like it's not like a cleaver, if that makes sense.
So it's kind of the difference between like a blunt hit and like a
Yeah, because the weight of the English sword is going to help you like take that arm off all the way. Like, not that a Chinese sword won't take someone's arm off, but like it's got that extra like heave ho like to it.
Got it.
Um,
Come listen to us. You'll learn about swords.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not very good with a sword, actually. We did bow staff, I'm an international grand champion in nunchucks. It's my kind of thing. Doubles, actually, with one in each hand. And then you know, like that, naginata, it's like a spear, but it's got the flat blade that curves up like that. That one I can do. Yumi, which is a bow, like I said, like a bow. That one's, it's really, really big. Yeah, it's like Kagome's.
Ooh, who's getting the sequel? I mean, awesome.
When they announced that sequel, I lost my everything. Like, oh my God. I cannot wait for this sequel.
Yes. Brenda, you need to watch it. It's amazing. Just watch
We're gonna have to do a podcast on it, so she just has to watch it.
Yes.
It's so good. Like, Band of Seven is wonky, but after that it's better.
Yeah. If you like Mulan and like strong women characters, you'll like the arc of Kagome.
Let me tell you about Kikyo.
Okay, another.
Or Kagura. I know, you're right. This is China, not Japan.
Another conversation. Anyways, back to legacy. What do you hope Mulan's legacy becomes in the future, Brenda?
I hope it's going to inspire a ton of young girls to like pick up the martial arts. Like, there's such a misconception that the martial arts are for boys, and despite the people I did martial arts with being predominantly female, we had so many girls in my class. Such a misconception that like women, they actually martial arts competitions don't segregate male and female. You all compete in the same one. The only one they separate us is sparring, and even then, like, it's more so based on weight class, and it tends to just be different weights. The guys tend to try to aim for like the 200 or pounder weight classes, where the women are closer to like 125, 130, and so that's what separates us more typically. But because there's definitely been like, I've been in tournaments and stuff where women have been in the sparring arenas with us as well. Like, they really don't, like, I've competed against women in kata, in weapons, and all of it. Like, it's one of the few things they actually don't segregate via gender, which is fantastic, which it goes against the like misconception of it. So I'm hoping a lot of girls pick up martial arts after this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a really noble thing. I think for me, I want this film to kind of correct the mistakes of the past, which might be a big ask.
Yeah.
On one hand, I really, like Tori, I want this film to do what it did for me, for little girls everywhere, and the little boys too, really, to kind of see themselves as the warriors that they are. And even if because I don't think of myself as a warrior, I'm a lot of things. A warrior is not one of them, but to find that fire within, right, that this film kind of helps them see, whatever your path may be, that's an okay path, so long as you choose it and you choose to kind of build it yourself, right? I do hope that kind of comes out in the movie. The other thing is, I don't want it to be this projection or this propaganda piece for Disney and for whatever it is that they're marketing, right? I want it to be more. I want it to be a film worth making. One of the things that the music for Mulan did was give it its soul. I want this movie to have a heart and a soul. I want it to be noble in its pursuits, which, I think the story itself just kind of lends itself to that. But I also want it to kind of help forge the path for more heroes like Mulan, right? We got Mulan. She's one Chinese hero. She's great. She can't be the only one.
Right.
I want more stories, right? And I think this is one of the conversations a lot of people have is why keep remaking old stuff and not make new stuff? There's so many women out there. There's so many heroes of color. There's so many heroes in the LGBTQA plus community that you can highlight. And I hope that this is the start of that kind of legacy, not the repetition of the past, because we don't need the past repeated. We need new media to envision a better future.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. I hope that they take this opportunity to reclaim that story, to let it be what it needs to be and as authentic as it needs to be, right? I do hope that they amend for some of those and atone for some of those decisions in the past, but I highly doubt that's going to happen.
Right.
And we can hope, but I really don't think that's going to happen. Something is going to happen where they're going to, put a person in a position that's not glorious at all, right? Whether that's characterizing the woman as a villain, right? Or, categorizing like this racial or ethnic group as the villain. I think it's going to happen. It's bound to happen. That's part of China's history. So, it's not all glorious, even though they have magnificent structures and magnificent stories. It's not all glorious. There are very ugly parts and dark parts to China's history. And, I do think that the film will perpetuate some of that going forward. But I do hope that it leads to more films, that it leads to, I'm glad that the date was pushed back and that it's going to get a decent opening, right? Again, I have a feeling it's going to get pushed back again from August, right? I just think it will. And I'm glad that it will, because I think it does, just like the Black Widow movie deserves a proper premiere.
Wonder Woman as well, yeah.
Right, that this gets a proper premiere as well. I hope that it gets a big box office weekend opening for it, and that folks behind the scenes are inspired to keep making movies about not just Chinese stories, but about any stories, right?
Yeah.
Because we need them. We really do need them. We need more stories that speak to other different sects from all over the world, not just main dominant cultures. And I think that Pixar did a wonderful job recently with their Bao short, right? Where they kind of showed this.
Yeah.
Right. It was disturbing a little bit.
Disturbing as hell. I saw it for the trailer. They played it when I was in theaters to see Spider-Man 1 or 2. I don't remember which one it was. I don't know if it was Homecoming or the other one. But I remember, and I was like, "Ooh, that was." And she ate
it was right. Like she ate the bao, but it was a really good story, and it was a really heartfelt story. But we need more. So and it wasn't Mulan, and right. So it like Big Hero 6 is a really good movie too. For that reason, I think.
Oh, I love Big Hero 6.
It's such a great film, and I hope that we get more movies like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about like Coco, right? And I'm sorry, it's on my mind.
I've never seen it.
It's good.
I know. I need to see it. At first I was like boycotting it, like, and then I decided I'm not boycotting it anymore. Because like it made me mad that we had Book of Life and then Coco one right after each other, and I was like, Latin America is more than just like Dios de los Muertos, and it was really bothering me. But then everyone keeps saying Coco's good. I'm like, I'm gonna have to go see it.
Well, and the funny thing to me about Dia de los Muertos is it's often claimed by Mexican culture,
right?
And it's a huge part of Mexican culture. And we celebrate it differently in Central America. I know we celebrate it differently in El Salvador than people in Guatemala do, right? And even in South America, I feel like it doesn't get as strong a showing, but I'm sure that's not true. Because it is a big thing, right? Honoring our ancestors, that part is a huge part of our culture and kind of how we live our day to day. And you can't have a huge holiday like Christmas or Easter without having some kind of image representing your family, particularly family members who have passed away. But those stories, they're not about heroes, right? They're about just regular people kind of encountering their culture and kind of figuring out what that means. And I think I said earlier that Mulan's not the only hero of color. Obviously, she can't be the only woman. And while I want to see more heroes, I also want to just see regular people be regular them, right?
And just have a journey, like through life.
Kind of like the Never Have I Ever story, right? Where we have just regular teenagers talking about grief or growing through the grief process, right? And what that means when you're trying to grapple with all these other identities while simultaneously having to contend with one of the hardest things that you've ever will have to encounter, right? The death of a parent. And that's actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about with Mulan, right? We often highlight of mother's love for her kid, right? Or a father's love for his kid. Mulan highlights a child's love for a parent. And I think given the circumstances of the world we're living in right now, a lot of us are dealing with that fear, right? Like I keep telling my mom, I'm like, if I could put you in a plastic bubble and protect you from everything, I would. And I wouldn't even hesitate. And she laughed at me and she said, you know, that's what it feels like to be a mother, especially when your child is so young and you're trying to protect them from the world, right? And I'm not a parent. I don't know what that feels like. The closest I have are my dogs, right? And I definitely felt that way. Jen will attest to the fact that I would not let her carry Cosmo when he was a puppy because I was so afraid and so protective of him. It was ridiculous, and I do apologize for that, Jen. I'm sharing it with the world. I do apologize for being so freaking nutty.
This is why you have big mom energy and why your students think of you as a mom.
Yeah, I think I'm gushy and fluffy and shit, but you know, whatever. But anyway, but yeah, I think this is one of the things that I really do want to see with our media, right? This kind of story, right, where you kind of flip it a little bit, where we typically expect that, but we see the, you know, love isn't just from a parent to a child, it goes the other way around. And in this case, Mulan was willing to do anything to protect her father.
And I love that scene so much when she finally comes home because her parents are like, we don't know if she's gonna live or die. And she like has the sword and the pendant and she's like, I got these for you to honor you. And he's like, I don't even want them. Like, and he just like hugs her and he's like, you
greatest honor
okay?
of all is having you as a daughter.
But he's just like so happy that she's like alive. Like, and
he throws Shan Yu's sword
like
on the crest of the emperor to the ground and embraces her in a hug. Can you tell who the two Hufflepuffs in this room are right now?
I know. It's just such a fantastic scene because, like, when you think about it, their last conversation with each other was an argument.
The last thing he told her was, I know my place. It's time
you learn yours. Yep.
Sorry, I'm just reliving. I love the film.
And her place was protecting her dad.
But see, we just had this conversation about all the problems, and we come back to it, and we still love it, right? But on that note, I think it's time for our final thoughts. We already shared what our expectations and our hopes are for the film. So I'll leave that at that and just share with you guys that next time we will be discussing Bend It Like Beckham to continue our highlights of Asian cultures and Asian stories, right? And so we are moving a little bit to across the pond. We're not physically moving, obviously, but we're going
a rowboat,
to
like my dad says, in a rowboat.
Rowboat, yeah. We will be discussing the what it really means to be Indian and British at the same time, which we obviously have no idea what that means, but we will talk about the film and how we enjoy it and my rediscovery of Mel C as a solo singer. Who knew?
I'm very excited for it.
Yes, me too. All right, with that said, we will see you next week. Thank you for watching us. See you next week.
As always, see you next time. Bye.